If you're thinking about embarking on a very long and possibly dangerous trip across state lines on your riding lawnmower, you gotta pack a bunch of wieners. You gotta pack your cigarettes, even though your doctor says not to smoke anymore. And I'm guessing that Alvin Straight also stashed away quite a few packages of coffee. Old Al couldn't bring anything on this trip from our sponsor because his journey happened before they even existed. But someone trying to do that voyage now would love to stash some, Bev?
Sparkplug coffee?
True, in his trailer, or her trailer. They provide premium quality coffee, which is the best you've ever made. It's also cheaper and so much better than takeout. Sparkplug makes it very convenient for you because they deliver right to your door, and we Canadians get free shipping. Americans like Mr. Straight would have to pony up some dollars to get a cross-border delivery, but it's still an affordable proposition. And if you join the Autopilot Coffee Club, all the better. Pause or cancel anytime. But you won't want to do that. You can't find your new favorite that way. So go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and give it a try. Our HYES promo code will get you a one-time 20% discount. Brew the best, man. That's Sparkplug Coffee. Very well, we've got you set up with a nice hot drink. Now get comfy on your mower seat as we kick off our first episode of November.
And action! Have you ever seen
The Straight Story? Well, friends and neighbors, remember the day before the 5th day of November, as Have You Ever Seen presents a 623rd podcast. We tackle classic motion pictures on this channel, and we spoil them from the top to the tail, the whole damn thing. Well, I shouldn't say damn in this, because there's no swearing in this movie at all.
G-rated Disney film.
Richard Farnsworth. Not that damn's a swear, but it's bad enough. I revoke it. The whole darn thing. I'm the guy who once rode a riding lawnmower around, although never with a cowboy hat on, but I only did that because it was part of my chores. Ryan Ellis. And here's a lady I would ride across state lines to go see if I heard she might be dying. My wife, Bev.
That's me.
Of course, on the bright side, we live together, so I wouldn't have to embark on a harrowing journey to go see you. I just have to climb the stairs to go see you.
How romantic.
Why do birds suddenly appear on my way up here, upstairs? Well, before we get into this any further, tomorrow is America's presidential election. No matter who's declared the winner tomorrow night, or days after that, or whenever, I expect lying, whining, and catastrophe, possibly even civil war. We can do nothing about it, especially since we don't even live in that nutty country. So let's say figs to all that, and talk about a movie that's touching and sweet and heartwarming. God knows we all need some positivity right now.
And deeply American.
This is very true, yeah. The coming attractions trivia for The Straight Story. You can always argue that a movie is based on something that really happened to somebody, but other than Alvin Straight riding a lawnmower to go see his brother, very true, really happened, David Lynch has only directed one other based on true events type film. What was it?
It was The Elephant Man.
That's true. It's also the only other Lynch movie that starts with the word the.
Oh, what do you know?
Further useless trivia.
And I've never seen it.
We gotta watch it. Maybe next year.
It's on my list. Maybe we should cover it next year.
Next year's 45 years, and also it would be not the last Lynch movie. We've covered all the Tarantinos now. We just did that a few months ago with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But if we cover The Elephant Man, that's almost all of them, other than Dune and Eraserhead.
And
Inland Empire, right, that's true, yeah. Okay, well, not almost all maybe, but we're getting there.
He's worthy.
He is. So, You Can Always Depend on the Kindness of Strangers was released by Buena Vista Pictures. That's Disney, of course. One day shy of exactly a quarter century ago, on November 5th, 1999. So that was Guy Fawkes Day that year. We're one day shy of it now. It cost about 10 million smackers to make this thing, but it still failed. Not even getting all that close to breaking even at the box office. What a shame. It should have. But Bev, this G-rated movie, G-rated, David Lynch, is 25 years old now. Let us know what we're talking about by giving us the lowdown, the skinny, if you will, on Alvin Straight and his story.
Richard Farnsworth is Alvin Straight, an elderly World War II vet whose old age is catching up with him. He's got bad hips, bad eyes, and he can't drive anymore. And after learning that his estranged brother suffered a stroke, and against the better judgment of his daughter and his friends, Alvin travels the 240 miles from his home in Iowa to his brother's place in Wisconsin on a riding lawnmower. On his long trip, he meets different kinds of people. He helps some of them help him. And with some difficulty and many nights on the road, Alvin completes his journey and reaches his brother.
Or, in a nutshell, he's very slowly getting to Wisconsin.
I have my own nutshell. It's Iowa lawn goes entire fall without getting mowed once.
Nice touch, yes. Rose can't mow the lawn now. Yeah. He shot the other one with his gun.
Yeah.
He's got this new one. He's gone all these months.
What a mess.
I did the math, by the way. It's a 240-mile trip. The mower goes about 5 miles an hour, so it's about 48 hours drive time. Even if he can only handle the vibrations of the mower, he's older, his hips are bad and all that, for 5 hours a day, that's about a 10-day journey. But he says to Danny that he's on the road for 5 weeks. Let's add another week,
and
maybe
more.
more.
And he's still not even there.
Right, so let's say it's 6 or even 7 weeks. And we'll talk more about the real Alvin Straight. I guess it did take him 6 weeks.
His hips were bad. That thing's got to shake like crazy. When you had a riding lawnmower when you were a kid mowing your parents' lawn.
I guess that's true.
Does it vibrate a lot?
Yeah, but I was so young that wouldn't have mattered to me at all.
No, but a 73-year-old with bad hips, it sure would.
I wanted to make that point and make fun of this whole thing. We did during the movie, but then I looked it up and it said he took about 6 weeks. He did it in the summer. They filmed this in more like the fall time frame. So Farnsworth clutching in his jacket a few times is probably legitimate because they were shooting in September.
You can see his breath in a couple of those scenes.
And they actually shot in Iowa and Wisconsin as well. Yeah. They actually filmed his route, Alvin's route. Maybe not literally entirely 100%, but most of it
they
was
shot
the actual route.
In the actual sequential order that it happened. I'm sure there's some shots that they repeated here and there, but each scene was shot in the proper order.
Which is unusual for any film, and I'm sure it was for Lynch, his whole career. Okay, Rotten Tomatoes critics in this movie, they love it. 95% of them say it's good. 105 fresh, 6 rotten. The average is 8.2 out of 10, 91% of audiences. For Lynch, that's up there with Blue Velvet and Crumb, which he produced. Crumb, the documentary, which we covered, right?
A long time ago now. It's one
it
of my favorite movies.
It outgrossed Straight Story and Blue Velvet combined.
Get out!
By about 5 million. Because
Really?
looking at Rotten Tomatoes and putting it in order to look for the best reviews, they stack up. I think they're 1, 2, and 3 for Lynch as a producer and directing twice. And Blue Velvet's one of the most famous movies of all time, especially when you talk about an influential R-rated. We all know what Blue Velvet is. And I love this movie, but Crumb, which is very good too, but it outgrossed them both. And it's a documentary. This was 147th at the 1999 U.S. box office. The Sixth Sense was number 2. The Blair Witch Project, I just covered that last week, was 10th. And Run, Lola Run was 140th. We covered that 3 months ago. It was nominated for 1 Oscar. Richard Farnsworth for Best Actor. He's so good in this. If he'd won that, I'd have been fine with that. Kevin Spacey won his 2nd Oscar for Best... Well, first for Best Actor. He'd won Supporting Actor for Usual Suspects. He's great in American Beauty. That is true. I know he's terrible, but he was great in that film. I was rooting for Russell Crowe in The Insider, but Denzel was up for The Hurricane. He's terrific. Sean Penn was very good in Sweet and Low Down. Farnsworth would have been a great choice, too. It's one of those categories. It's hard to pick who deserved to win. And Spacey was a little bit due for Best Actor at that point.
American Beauty really had a moment that year, too.
It was the Best Picture winner as well. And Farnsworth was at the show and didn't live too much longer. We'll talk about that later. He was the oldest Best Actor nominee for that category specifically, not an actor, but Best Actor, ever, until Anthony Hopkins won for The Father a few years ago.
Another knockout performance. Just,
one of the best things Hopkins ever did.
Oh, my God, yeah, incredible.
I think this could come up for all kinds of technical awards at the Oscars beyond just, maybe not Best Picture, although I love the movie, but the music was terrific. Angelo Badalamenti, the cinematography by Freddie Francis. The only American Film Institute nomination, by the way, was for the Top 100 Cheers. It's very inspiring. If it had been on the list, I'd been fine with that. But all right, there. So that's the setup, the Straight Story. I'm a big fan. What about you?
I think it's lovely. When it came out and seeing it now, all these years later, I've never totally agreed with all the praise it got. I thought it might hit different now that I'm 25 years older, and I think it did. I find the ending quite moving, and I adore Farnsworth's performance. It's just as good as everyone says, and what a swan song. An incredible way to go out. But I'm a little take it or leave it on this one.
Really?
It's less that I'm trying to figure out...
Cold Dead Heart.
I do have a cold dead heart. It's less that I'm trying to figure out why I don't like it. It's more one of those movies where I'm like, what does everybody see that I don't? I know I struggle with the clunky acting. He's incredible, but there's some non-professional actors, and some of them are better than others. And sometimes it really takes me out of it. I also think Sissy Spacek deserves a ton of praise and credit for her performance. I think her performance is actually so beautiful. And I've kind of used it as like a benchmark when I think of... high-functioning people. They never say that she is on the spectrum. They wouldn't have even called it then. But I think it's pretty clear to me that whether she knew what she was doing or not, whether she was basing her performance on someone she knew or one of Alvin Straight's real kids or whatever, it seems pretty obvious to me that she's playing somebody who's on the spectrum. For many years, I used it as my benchmark for somebody who is on the spectrum, for lack of a better word, whatever, but he's still really smart and capable and competent. Someone who's very high functioning, but clearly different. 2 performances blow me away, but other than that, I don't know, the movie just has not ever really gotten under my skin.
I think she does a great job in this role, and she's not on screen that much, but I love how Lynch keeps her alive in the story. The last thing that Alvin says to his daughter before he drives off, that we see on screen, not the last thing he would have said to her in reality, but the last thing on screen is, "The sky is sure full of stars tonight." Why I noted that is because that's a tie to the ending. He says to the priest he meets in the cemetery that he wants to sit down with his brother. I want to make peace, sit with him, look up at the stars.
Like they did when they were kids.
Right, like when they were kids. And at the very end, he meets up with Lyle. Lyle looks up, and then Alvin looks up too. It isn't nighttime, so no stars yet, but then they do end with a star field. Like the movie starts with a star field, and it ends with that as well. The notion could be that they sit there for a while until it gets dark, and they just watch the stars like they did as kids. My other nutshell, by the way, was going to be about how it's family. If we do the Vin Diesel thing, right? Because he does hit that point pretty hard, but it's appropriate. It does fit the theme. This movie is about family so much. He's doing the one thing he wanted to do, which is to sit with his brother. They don't say much. They don't need to say much.
And is there a greater, more simple pleasure than just stargazing?
We do that a lot. We don't watch the stars so much.
You can't see the stars from our house.
But we sit outside and just at nighttime, early evening, watch people go by, watch nothing happen at all. Same kind of concept, at least. We can't see up because of the roof on our porch.
It's about quiet moments together, and it's about the through line that's something that they had as boys, and it's something they still have as old men. And I think there's a universality to it, too. It's something all of us have done, and all of us have marveled at the sky or had quiet moments like that.
There are 3 emotional moments. One, you didn't see it, but I was wiping away tears. It was the girl.
Oh, really?
The crystal thing.
Really? The crystal thing gets to you?
Talking to Verlin about their war experiences at the bar. I
love that scene.
I love it too. And then the end. So we'll talk about Crystal and we'll talk about the bar later on. But right now, he finally gets there, right? The tractor broke down again. And then it magically starts when that guy stops by in his tractor. And that guy, by the way, is credited as a stand-in. So I wonder if he was sometimes doing some of the work. Because Richard Farnsworth really was struggling from having bad hips as well. So maybe he was sometimes playing Farnsworth. Anyway, he stops by. They talk for a minute. Then the mower magically starts. He gets in the yard. Lyle? Lyle? And it's almost like, oh God, am I too late? Did he die? Yeah. Although at least people have told him, like the priest, I've seen him since the stroke, so he didn't die from the stroke. But it's been weeks. Maybe he did die since. A lot of actors could have played that great. They talked about Paul Newman for this, and James Coburn, I think James Garner, and many other actors. Not surprisingly, big-name stars are going to be talked for this. Farnsworth is a great actor, but he's not a big-name star. I don't know if they could have done that any better. And the number of times he does, maybe not blatantly, but tears up. He and Harry Dean Stanton tear up at the very end when they're sitting on the porch, for sure. They don't really say much. So then when he hears Lyle say, Alvin, the relief that, oh, thank God. Lyle says, you rode that thing to come see me? I did, Lyle. And I believe that's the last line in the whole movie.
It's a beautiful bit of writing. He asks him about the mower. Alvin confirms. There's an understanding reached between them because they don't need to say it aloud. They're brothers. They know each other. They're both like stoic, strong, silent types. And Lyle can put together what happened to bring him there under those circumstances. And the fact that he just sits down with him is all the communication they need. Beautiful, economical, emotional storytelling. There's no words that could have added to those performances in that moment.
Mary Sweeney, who was married to Lynch, I think after this, but they've been together for a while. They got married many years later, but they've been together for quite a long time. I think they have a kid together, in fact. She was the editor, she was a producer, and she wrote it as well. This was her writing debut, and she founded this. She and Lynch talking about movies, I guess, talking about life, and then he reads it and says, I want to direct this movie that you want to do. As a producer, I guess she would have produced it for somebody else.
Yeah, he said he had no interest in the story. He knew that she was into it, and he's like, yeah, cool, do your thing, babe. It wasn't until she presented the script to him and he read it that he knew it was his project and he wanted to do it.
Look at what he did before and after this. I love them both, but Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive,
I know.
Which are nothing like this, although very emotional films, especially Mulholland Drive. We really feel for Naomi Watts, as we do for Farnsworth in a different way in this movie. So in that way, as much as Lynch... Roger Ebert, probably my favorite film critic of all time, rarely liked him. He loved this movie. I think he gave it 4 stars, as he should have. I'm sure that Siskel, if he was still alive, would have given it a great rating too. And yet his movie is sandwiched, but there's other ones, and then Blue Velvet before that, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, all these violent, sexual, R-rated things, and this is just so the opposite of that.
They're very nihilistic films. They're films that believe the worst about humanity, really pessimistic. Think of Blue Velvet, the opening scene with this over-the-top white picket fence and the fire truck and all the clean-cut kids and everything's perfect, but the camera dips down and shows us the roaches.
This does something similar.
Lawn.
The music is similar in this.
It doesn't show you roaches.
No, but what it does is it has this nice moment where the neighbor is out suntanning when Rose is left to go off to do something, and then you hear a thud.
Sure, but that's just him falling down. That's not a sinister, evil.
But what's the music playing?
Actions.
You pointed out the music sounds a lot like
every time
Blue
I
Velvet.
hear Angelo
Twin Peaks.
I hear Twin Peaks, and if I hear Twin Peaks, I'm thinking about the Black Lodge of it all. I'm thinking about this sinister undercurrent in every small town, but this movie is not about that at all. It's not an anti-Lynch movie. I think it has plenty of Lynch touches in it, but it's so optimistic.
I think the opening, if you didn't know what was going to happen, you saw this at the festival, you saw it in the theater in November that year, you might think when it opens that Sissy Spacek, we know her, as she walks off and the friend is suntanning, you hear a thud, that something really bad just happened, and we're about to see something awful.
It's just an old
Unless
man
you heard what this movie's about.
What a clumsy moment and fell. It must have been so confusing for anybody seeing this film for the first time in 99, knowing it's a Lynch film, but not knowing it wasn't going anywhere sinister. They must have spent half the film just on tenterhooks, waiting for something dark and terrible to happen. Right. It's almost a totally different experience the second time you watch it because you know what's going to happen and you're no longer waiting for that Lynch moment to just take you into the most depraved depths of humanity.
He's off on his own so often. Yes, he's in Iowa and Wisconsin, but that doesn't matter. He could be bothered with or attacked by somebody at any point. I don't think he really cares that much. Let's get back to the ending again. You said, and maybe you're right about this, although in reality this guy did get home. I guess what happened is that Lyle's son drove him home, which makes sense, right? But in the movie's portrayal, your concept when the credits were rolling, we were talking about it, is that Alvin never plans to get home because the mower just failed. He's almost there, not quite to Lyle's. It fails. Then it magically starts. He gets into his yard. They sit down together. They're both really old and frail. They're in their 70s, but they almost seem like they're 95, not 73 or so, 75, whatever.
They're the ages of men who fought in World War II, who grew up poor in a part of the States that's not very forgiving to poor men.
Alvin is smoking through this and eating wieners, not eating healthy, not doing anything his doctor told him to do. Stop smoking, use a walker. No, I guess the canes are a good enough replacement for the walker, but he's still eating bad food like wieners, and he's still smoking. He's not chain smoking, but he smokes a lot in this film. And then he finally has a drink when he gets to Mount Zion. I'm giving you the standpoint that you think, which is that he is saying, this is the end of the road for me, which wasn't really true for the real Alvin Straight, but in the movie's portrayal, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah. It's a really curious thing because he makes quite a point of saying, I don't drink, and here's the reasons why. When I came back from the war, I drank too much to forget. I was an angry drunk, and it was no good for me or anybody that I loved.
And part of why I had to fight with Lyle was because we were both drinking.
Right, and he's sitting there at a bar drinking a glass of milk, the most opposite thing that you can drink from a beer. So the movie really wants us to know this man doesn't drink, and then the last thing he does before he gets to Lyle, he could just keep carrying on and go to Lyle. Why does he go to a bar? Why does he have a beer? The movie never really answers the question, but there's different options, like, is it to soothe his nerves? Because he's actually quite nervous about seeing his brother. He's nervous about being rejected. Maybe he's nervous that he is too late. Is it to dawdle before he gets to his destination?
Maybe both.
Maybe both of those things. Is it because he spent 6 weeks on the road and he does a lot of thinking? And this is the beauty of his performance. His change is so subtle. And you understand that at the end of the movie when he has that conversation with the other war vet and they share their stories and he tells him something he's never told anybody before, that he accidentally killed one of his squad mates. And he's really broken up about it. He could only reach that point because he's had all this time to think by himself. And he's thinking about how this is definitely the last trip like this he's ever going to make. It's a miracle that he made it to his destination at all. He's got constant reminders of how old he's getting. He can barely walk, the discomfort that he feels, that he's broke. I think he's coming to realize that he's at the end of his life. So if you're realizing you're aging out, the end is nigh, you don't care about doing anything to extend your life, that's obvious. So why are you not drinking? What am I saving it for?
He does only have one beer, though.
He does only have one beer. Maybe part of what he learned through his introspection is that all the things that made him an angry man when he was drunk, that made it a bad idea for him to drink, are things that he's matured out of, things that maybe even just through the course of this trip he's resolved and he feels safer.
He says to the priest, none of that matters now, the whole fight he had with Lyle. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get too personal here, but I had a whole thing with my sister, a big fight. We didn't talk for many years, maybe here and there about our parents when they had health issues, to be professional, if you will, about it. But then she apologized, we made up. It's been great ever since.
So great.
So yeah. I can relate to this movie.
I have a sister I haven't spoken to that I was very close with growing up, and we haven't spoken.
But you haven't had the reconciliation
in over a decade.
Like I got.
I don't think it's going to ever happen.
No, probably not. So I talked about how the ending is emotional and awesome, and I was definitely affected by it. That Lyle, Farnsworth is awesome in that. Is he dead? The scene at the bar with Verlin, I thought maybe I was going to bust out at that point, but I've seen that and the ending of this movie on YouTube lots of times. I think the reason why the other emotional scene, there's more than just three, but the big emotional scene with Crystal and the whole thing about how she's pregnant, she's a runaway, her boyfriend doesn't know she left, doesn't know that she's pregnant for that matter. And
he doesn't believe anybody wants her or will miss her.
And at first, they don't even really talk that much. He's just sitting there roasting a wiener. He gives her one. He's not roasting the wiener, is he? He just eats them raw. Well, I guess they're cooked, but we didn't, you know what I'm saying. I knew this happened. I've seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times over years, but I haven't seen this scene as often as I've seen those other ones on YouTube, so I've been desensitized. Yeah, it's cliche and it's corny, but he says when he talked to his kids, his wife had 14 babies, only 7 of them lived.
Yeah, wow.
He told them when they were young, here's a stick, break that. Oh, yeah, psh, that was easy. But then here's a bundle of sticks, break that. They couldn't do it. That's family. And the next day, he just sees the bundled sticks there. She's gone. And I think the movie's saying she's going back home.
That's exactly. She bundles the sticks. What a perfect, appropriate way to communicate with him. This man of few words. I don't need to tell him. I don't need to stick around and have a big speech if I just have this symbol that I leave behind. That's the perfect way to tell him that she's going home, that she listened to him, that he convinced her to go back to her family.
She heard him, yeah, exactly that phrase. I felt seen or heard. Very true. And he's talking from experience. He lectures the twins about be good to your brother, love your brother. I love how he's haggling with them, though, too, about how much of that time was fighting, how much of that time was working. And he haggles them down. He also haggles to get different prices on things like when he buys that mower in the first place, when he buys the John Deere. That wasn't really so much haggling, was it? It was more like, I'll offer you this much money, and then...
They're friends, too, so they have a great rapport. That actor, I wrote his name down
Everett
somewhere. But yeah,
McGill?
He's in Twin Peaks. Anybody who watches Twin Peaks knows him as Ed.
He also was in Dune for Lynch. But anyway, yeah, he haggles with the twins, and they agree. They don't seem to get the whole notion, which is, yeah, you guys may not like each other very much, but you're brothers. Be brothers. But they're also young, and they don't realize what's going on. You talked about the actors not being awesome in this movie sometimes, the non-professionals, because, of course, Farnsworth and Spacek and Harry Dean Stanton, who's barely on screen anyway, are all very good. But I do love the guy who plays Danny. I didn't write his credits down. I'm not even sure he's really an actor. What is his name again? He's James Cotta. I love the touches. He's in The Serious Man, by the way, which we covered earlier this year. This is his last movie. He was cop number 1 in that. Okay, hasn't made a movie since then. I love that whole sequence with them. So he's going down that hill. He's going too fast. And they're watching these firemen that are performing some kind of like training exercise on a burning house. That's their entertainment for the day. They see him riding out of control. He doesn't die. He could have. Ironically enough, he's another John Deere guy, like Everett McGill is. You got to get this fixed. And then the twins are messing him around. That's later on. But he's so nice to him. The whole thing about, I'm going to drive him to
great scene with
the rest of the way.
Wife. Yeah.
You're a good man, Danny. But then I got to finish this my own way. Another nice touch in that whole thing is when he's outside, they put up a little shelter for him with tarps and stuff. So he'll accept that kind of favor, but he doesn't want to go in the house. Mm-hmm. Do you have one of those wireless, the cordless phones, which was unusual in 1994? This is set in 1994. That's when the story happened.
He's very set on doing it exactly the way he wants to do it. He's stubborn. He's obstinate. And you respect him for it. And it's his determination to have some kind of autonomy because he's truly losing his freedom as he gets older.
And maybe Denny sees that because he offers the help but then doesn't push back too hard when the old man says, no, I don't want to do it that way. And I Googled it during the movie. Now, this may have changed all these years later. 30 years since Alvin actually did this and 25 since the movie was made. But if you map it from Mount Zion to Lorenz, or Lorenz, however that's pronounced, Iowa to Wisconsin. That's about a 5-hour drive total. And obviously when he gets to Danny's place, it's a couple hours at the most, I would think. But he doesn't want to do it that way, and I respect that. And the whole thing about he sincerely thanks him, meaning Alvin sincerely thanks Danny for all of his hospitality. I'm going to go early in the morning, and this movie does it so well where you don't have that last moment. Maybe Danny went out to say goodbye to him, but the movie shows that he gets up, has a cup of coffee, and he sees Alvin riding off. No final goodbye. Although, when you think about it, if he is going to ride home, if the movie's saying that he's going to have some time with Lyle and then leave and try to ride home on this mower that's probably broken down, but if he's going to do that, I guess he goes the same route. He might see these people again. But I do love the Riordan's little cameo in this movie. So whether or not you like those actors, I think that he's a terrific part of this film. The
He's good. Character. He's a good actor. The scene that bugs me, I hate the scene with the twins. I think they're corny and weird. It feels like they're just shipped in from a totally different movie. Watching it this time around, it reminds me of this stuff that I hated about Twin Peaks: The Return. The Dougie stuff.
Oh, I hated Dougie. And
right.
It was so stupid.
It reminded me of the Dougie stuff.
At least it says maybe 5 minutes.
Vibe. True, but there was this weird thing where one of the twins had this strange... He had something bandaged to his face, and there was never any explanation. That felt very Lynchian right there, that there was just these random strange things, almost to make it weird for no other purpose. But that scene took me out.
I read that Chris Farley was supposed to be in this, but then he died, of course. I guess he was going to be one of the brothers. He has a brother. Maybe that was the idea.
Yeah,
he would be one of those two brothers. And those two guys, they're not that good. But at least they're barely in the movie. Yeah. Dougie's such a huge part of the Twin Peaks Return. And that's one reason I didn't like Twin Peaks Return. Because you got Kyle MacLachlan, who does play the badass version, whatever that was. But then also, at some points, Dale Cooper. But the Dougie thing, dumb. I never got it. People love it, like our friend Carl, but I'm not in.
I liked plenty of stuff about Twin Peaks: The Return. But yeah, there's the Dougie stuff. There's the Jim Belushi stuff as well, which was the same sort of tone. It just felt like it didn't belong there.
It's funny to think this movie is 25 years old, and he's made 2 movies since this came out, Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, and then the Twin Peaks Return series, which was 8 or 10 episodes, whatever that was. And he's done online stuff, but that's it. He's still alive. He won an honorary Oscar in 2020. So I guess that was right before the pandemic, right? It would have been the 2019 show, so it would have been the Parasite year, I guess, when he won that Oscar. He's been nominated 4 times. So this guy who's, Hollywood's so terrible and everything. Yeah, but you've been nominated for 4 Oscars, 3 for directing, Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive, and then writing, I think, Elephant Man as well. He's such an artist, such a great filmmaker. I remember reading, I think it was a Salon writer, I used to read them religiously back in the day, that said this is the strangest movie and the most off-putting movie that he'd made. Which
off-putting.
I don't get that. I love the moment.
He called it the most experimental movie he ever made.
I guess that's true. It does seem like it's just an ordinary story. Maybe because it isn't freaky. Maybe because the guy expected, that reviewer expected, I think it was a guy, just like we said, it was going to be something bad would happen. Because
subverts
if
your
not for
expectations
that,
so much.
Why is this so weird? I love when that storm hits, though. It's right after Crystal leaves. He finds that little barn-type thing, that shelter, and just watches the rain coming down because he loves storms. He loves lightning storms. That's not a lightning storm in that case. There's so many times when the camera just watches the corn shimmering in the breeze or the trees or a sundown. That score by Badalamenti, which is a little bit, not hokey, but Midwest, which makes sense. And Lynch was born in Montana, which is probably why, yes, he's made his LA movies like Mulholland Drive, but he's also made these Middle American movies like this and Blue Velvet. I think he's more actually in tune with Middle America. I guess Blue Velvet's, or is it Twin Peaks? Twin Peaks is in the West Coast, but it might as well be Middle America. It isn't anything to do with New York or LA or Chicago or the big cities.
Mary Sweeney's from Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, yes. Yeah. So she was really in her element in writing this.
David Lynch, he's obsessed with The Wizard of Oz, right?
Right.
There's a character named Dorothy in this. Not like there's a ton of Wizard of Oz references, but Wizard of Oz, it's Kansas. It's the way that this mundane place, what people would consider the most banal, nothing parts of America, are actually Oz. That there actually is so much going on under the surface.
Or you go to LA and that's Oz.
Yeah, the artifice of LA is Oz, but there's this love and respect for, quote, real America. I mean, I don't really buy that real America, fake America stuff.
Betty/Diane in Mulholland Drive is from the Midwest, I believe, too. Goes to LA. I won a talent contest in the middle of America, some nowhere town, go to LA and have my life ruined. Same basic idea. Only this is not about that, but he does understand Middle America so well.
We covered Serious Man. You mentioned Serious Man. Oh, no wonder that actor is also in Serious Man. They were both shot in Wisconsin. He's just got to be like a local actor. The Coens also make movies about the Midwest. They're from around
More
there.
often than not, yeah.
Yeah, but they seem to have this more sinister version of the Midwest as well. You watch Fargo. It's a different style, obviously, from Lynch, but it's about how beneath the kindness of the exterior that really it's all just facade, and there's just as much bad stuff happening
but
in
not
those
in
places.
this.
But not in this.
Now,
No,
this
the
movie...
kindness is the kindness. They're definitely implying that the values of the Midwest are real, and Alvin Straight proves it.
There's really never any controversy. Everybody he meets is pretty nice. The cyclists, what the hell? So he's upset for seconds, but then he becomes friends with the cyclists and stays with them for that night. The one guy playing football, throwing the football around, says, what's the worst part about getting old? The worst part is remembering when you were young.
Something I'm definitely starting to relate to.
I like reminiscing.
No, I like reminiscing, but it's almost like a curse. In a way, I can relate to Alvin so much more than I could when I was younger.
Well, that's
I've
the
had
point,
a lot
yes.
of mobility issues for the past 7-8 years. Anyone who's a regular listener knows I had major foot surgery this year, and I'm still recovering from it. It's been a long time, and I am pretty fed up with it. And let me tell you, I think about what it was like to be 20, to feel comfortable in my own body and not think twice about standing up.
And riding
Just
a bike
something
marathon.
so simple. Oh, my God. The kind of stuff that I could have done and would have done, it haunts me a little bit now that I'm really struggling with my body.
See my notes here. One of the key things I got to mention, even if it's just briefly, is that I love when he haggles about the grabber. That's one of the haggling scenes too, right?
That's a cute scene.
That's worth that much money. But Alvin, that's my grabber.
He's just a man stuck in his ways who's like, but that's the good grabber.
I can't speak for Americans, but Canadians must know if they go to Dollarama that they have, not that grabber, because I think it's supposed to be a 4-prong dealie, but the 2-prong thing is about $3.50, or maybe it's a little bit more these days, but still, $4 is worth it. I use that thing so much in the yard. It's great for picking up dog poop. So I can relate to the grabber thing, and he uses it so much as he uses his crutches. Or, sorry, his...
Canes.
Canes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Puts those inside of his little trailer. Of course, there's the deer scene, too. That woman is so frazzled. I have to travel this road for work 4 hours a day. No, 40 miles a day is what it is. And she's hit 13 deer in 7 weeks, which is obviously just short of 2 deer a week.
That's the most Lynch scene in this movie by a lot. It's just this moment. It comes out of nowhere. You never totally understand what the purpose is. Although, don't you feel her frustration?
Yes.
Like, yeah, we all have things that we have to deal with that are completely intolerable, literally traumatizing.
Traffic especially.
And she's like, I have no choice. I have to put myself in this situation, even though it's completely intolerable.
And it's broad
me.
daylight. Why are these deer going after a car in broad daylight? When it's lights, I get it. They say the deer are attracted to the lights. That's all they can see. They can't see the car coming. Okay, but it's broad daylight. Why are they hitting this car so often or running into this woman's car?
But he makes the best of it. He has a nice venison dinner and turns the antlers into some cool decoration for his trailer.
Yeah, on his trailer, exactly. You know, it's a very Shrek touch. One of the funniest moments in Shrek is when Cameron Diaz's character, what's her name, Fiona, sings with the birds and then hits a high note and they explode. She sees the eggs, has a look in her face like, oh my God, they have no parents. Dissolved to cooking the eggs.
Yeah.
Very much what Alvin did here. Oh, well, I got to do something with this deer. I should probably help out and get off the road. Might as well cook it and have a pretty nice meal. We talked about how powerful the war stories are with Verlin. What happened to Verlin was an incendiary killed his buddies. I love that phrase. They both use the word buddies. And, of course, Alvin talks about how all my buddies' faces are young, and I'm, of course, old because they died. But his thing is about how he killed one of his buddies, who's a sniper, because he was doing his job or thought he was doing his job by killing something that moved, but it was one of the recon guys. I can understand why that would haunt you, and I'm not trying to tell anybody how they feel about a war thing. How would I know what that feels like? I'd feel guilty too, let's face it. It wouldn't matter if I shouldn't feel guilty. But what a terrible thing to have to carry with you. He's doing what he thinks is the right thing. He doesn't know it's the recon guy that he shot, and he never confessed to them that he thought he killed him. Why would he bother doing that in the first place? What would be the point of that? But then he finally tells this dude he meets in the middle of nowhere. I like how they both get emotional. There's some tears in the eyes, at least, but they don't really fall, I don't think, exactly.
They're doing the guy thing of just staring straight ahead.
And I know I've watched this scene late at night on YouTube in my emotional moments, and I've definitely shed my own tears watching it. Just not this time because I've seen it so many times before. It's a great scene. Wiley Harker plays him, so he's an actual actor. A lot of people in this movie are not actors, but he is. That is a beautiful scene between two old guys. Not a common thing in any movie. Even a war movie, you wouldn't see two guys who are in their 70s getting to play a scene like that.
And the movie does so much reflecting on aging and what it's like to be at the end of your life. And I love the line that he has in that scene. My face grows old, theirs stay young. The older you get, the more you understand what was lost because those guys didn't get to have all of those years. So now he's lived 50 years past the war. And that's 50 years of having his family, of having grandkids, of all of his relationships, his adventures, everything that he's gotten to experience, even coming to terms with what he did and growing up, maturing, and becoming the stoic great man that he is at the end of this movie. They'll never get to have that. And I think that's another thing about even me getting older. We're not Alvin's age, but I do think about people who I lost when I was younger who died prematurely. At the time, of course, it felt like this terrible tragedy, but it feels so much more tragic to me now, knowing what they've missed out on and all the years that they didn't get to have. I do reflect on it differently, just like he said.
Yeah, okay. One thing before we get to the cast list, I do love the comedy moment. This movie's not that funny. It has some comedy, though. When the first tractor, the riding lawnmower, doesn't get past the grotto and it fails, he gets taken back to town. He's on the bus with all the other old people taking pictures of them. Oh my God, who's this celebrity? He's not a celebrity. Well, he would become a celebrity, I guess, but they didn't know that at the time. And when he gets home, he shoots it.
Yeah, it blows up too.
To hell with that.
I
can relate to that one for sure. He's more calm than I would be. He's pretty simple about it, but then he does by the John Deere. And it is said by Everett McGill's character, the John Deere salesman, the transmission is good, but the thing is nearly 30 years old, and that's one of the things that does blow when he gets to the Riordan residence. They have to fix the drive belt, I believe, but also I think the transmission is gone.
Yeah, mostly it's because riding lawnmowers are not designed to
ride for days and days
ride
and days.
for days and days
weeks.
and days, dragging big, heavy thing. The problem happens when he's going downhill and he can't brake. There's just nothing about a riding lawnmower that's designed to handle that situation, and that's what damages it.
So Farnsworth, this was his last movie because he shot himself, October 2000. So the Oscars were in, I don't know, March or April that year. But he had bone cancer during the production, too.
It was terminal, he knew.
This was his last movie,
So you can say, yes, he died by suicide, but...
He didn't want to waste away. I respect that entirely.
Yeah.
He was in Red River. We covered that. He had a small role in Gone with the Wind. I forgot about that. I don't know who he was in that movie. But then also, he's so great as Buster in Misery. And he's also in The Natural. He's the assistant coach or bench coach, whatever, in that film. Chris and I covered that for scoring at the movies. The real Alvin died in 1996. So The Journey was in 94. He died in 96. He was 76. And I also read that he tried to make a trip to Idaho in 95, but then that failed. He didn't get very far at all. The guy was determined. Sissy Spacek, she's David Lynch's, or at least was, David Lynch's sister-in-law, because he was married to Mary Fisk, and then she was married to Jack Fisk.
Oh.
Those two are siblings, and then Spacek and Lynch were married to those two people. Lynch has been married many times, not to Mary Fisk anymore, but he was married to her at one point.
I read that they were friends, that they were close, and I was like, oh, that's funny. I never knew that. How did they meet? This is the only movie that they ever did together,
in, yeah.
Right?
And then Jack Fisk was the production designer or art director or whatever, I think on Eraserhead. Maybe not anything else, or maybe there were other things he did with Lynch. But that's her husband. So Skylar Fisk, her daughter, is Jack Fisk's daughter also. So we covered her in Badlands, I believe it was last year, and also Carrie many years ago. We never did In the Bedroom, but I love that movie, and she was nominated for that, and she very well could have won again for that. She won for Coal Miner's Daughter, and maybe we'll cover that next year when it is 45 years old. And I like how he does a good job of keeping her alive in the story after Alvin leaves, because he calls her for more money, and we have other scenes with her.
And he tells a story about her kids.
Her kids were taken away because of an accident somebody else caused. It wasn't her fault, but because of the way she is on the spectrum, whatever we would have called it back then. She was blamed for it, but it's not her fault. And we do see at least one important scene where she's just staring off into the distance, thinking about her kids. Harry Dean Stanton, we've covered him 8 times now. So he's in Cool Hand Luke in a small role. The Godfather Part 2, he's an FBI agent. Alien, of course, great role there. Repo Man, The Last Temptation of Christ, Wild at Heart, and Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me. So that's the 3rd Lynch movie now we've covered with him in it. And Dan Flannery, the doctor who says, no more smoking and use a walker, which, by the way, Lyle has.
Yeah.
So he's a doctor. This was his first ever movie. He was in Contagion, which we covered during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, over 4 years ago. And also The Express, the football movie that Chris and I covered on Scoring at the Movies. For Lynch, we've now covered Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, Lost Highway, and Mulholland Drive. So that's 6 times in his, I don't know if his 10, 11 movies. Certainly more than half his movies we've covered now. Mary Sweeney wrote this. It was her first ever screenplay. She has written very few others. And John Roach, his only writing credit. I believe that was a friend of hers or something from before. It must have been a Wisconsin friend who understood the area and the people and that kind of thing. She produced it along with Neil Edelstein or Edelstein. She produced Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive. He produced Mulholland Drive and The Ring, the horror movie we covered many years ago. The film is 239-1. We watched our very soft DVD. The movie, I know, looks great, but not on our TV with a DVD. And why is this movie not on Disney Plus? It's a literal Disney movie. Because it probably would look incredible. Cinematographer was Freddie Francis. He directed a lot. Also shot Glory, which we covered several years ago. That was beautiful. Also shot The Elephant Man and Dune for Lynch. Mary Sweeney cut it. She had so many jobs in this movie. She cut Twin Peaks' Fire Walk with Me, Lost Highway, and Mulholland Drive. And of course we know this. Angelo Badalamenti was the composer, Lynch's guy. I think every single Lynch project ever, including, of course, Twin Peaks, the TV show. And also did the score on Christmas Vacation and Secretary. So he's come up a lot in this channel over the years. What do you think of the look, the cutting, and the music?
I'd say it looks like a movie that has a small budget, and sometimes there are shortcomings. The print we were watching was so bad.
It did not help.
It would be unfair for me to even comment on the cinematography. The simplicity adds to the film, so editing is good. I think that they tell a very good economical story. It's a slow story, but it never feels boring.
As for what happens next, well, Alvin and Lyle say maybe another 8 or 10 words to each other. Then he bids his brother a fond farewell and heads home the next day. After all, he saw him. All seems to be forgiven, or at least settled. They don't have much to say to each other probably anyway. This was them doing their due diligence, especially Alvin, obviously. Yay, straights! But your theory is he's never going home, and he knows it. Plus, the mower barely made it. How's he going to get back? Well, I said in reality that the nephew drove him back. And by the way, Lyle's real name was Henry. I guess they had to change it for some kind of rights thing, maybe, because why Lyle? I don't know. He was Henry Straight, though. And it did take him about 6 weeks to get there in reality. He must have really lingered. But I guess that's part of the point. I want to do this my own way. So if I want to ride for an hour and a half and then sit there in my little uncomfortable chair, probably more comfortable than the mower, and think beside the fire all night long.
But yeah, the journey is the point, right? Yeah. And it's the grand gesture he makes to his brother as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine if I was in Lyle's situation and saw that somebody rode up on a riding lawnmower from a whole different province, in our case, in Canada. It would be touching to me, too. All right, last thoughts on The Straight Story, our first movie of November.
There's lots to like about it. For some reason, I don't feel that love that other people have for it, but I'm glad it moves you. And God, I just could never stop saying great things about Farnsworth's performance. It's a gift. It's so wonderful.
The film is beautiful. It's touching. It's also episodic, but it is a road movie, so we expect that. It sounds like the real Alvin spent a lot of time on the road, too, because he says to Rose, going to go back on the road. I thought maybe he was a truck driver, but I looked him up, and I guess he wasn't a truck driver, but he was in his element doing this out on his own in some way, at least. This is just a movie that has faith in people. I think that's a big part of why I like it. I think we've lost that faith, considering how our politics have gone for many years now, here and especially in America. But people are still people. Maybe we can be something like that again. I often say I hate people. I said to you just yesterday morning, I think it was. And I have no faith in a large group of them to ever do the right thing. And I think the aftermath of the election tomorrow is going to be awful no matter who won. But seeing The Straight Story gives me some hope. Anyway, I just love the movie. Farnsworth is as perfectly cast as anybody ever could have been. Just as much as Newman or Lemon. Jack Lemmon was talked about for this too. He would have been great, for sure. But I think this lesser-known actor, who was nominated before, by the way, for Comes a Horseman with Redford and Fonda back in the late 70s. So 2 nominations in the span of 20 years, 79 and 99.
Jack Lemmon could have been great. Paul Newman. These are great actors. But Farnsworth feels like a real person in a way that a movie star I don't think ever could. Lemmon
had a default, especially as an older actor anyway, of that watery eyes thing anyway. I don't think he was crying very often, but when you see him do some of his latter things, especially on Inside the Actors Studio, maybe he was about to cry a lot on that show, I don't know. But he's watery-eyed a lot. Maybe that's just a default as an older man. Also, his last movie was the next year, Legend of Bagger Vance. But Farnsworth gets watery a lot in this movie and does literally shed some tears, manly tears that they are.
Manly tears.
Well, they are. Isn't it the kind of guy that he would ever, I need a therapist.
You're not blubbering or something about his buddies that he lost in the war.
So he gets to play a lot of determination, but also humanity, sweetness, and a real heartbreaking emotion. Tim Burton went out of his comfort zone a little when he made Ed Wood, which we covered last week. Well, this wasn't what most people would expect from David Lynch either, obviously. And I appreciate that he tried something different from the violence and the sex and the nudity and the R-rated stuff, surreal, nightmarish stuff. I guess Farnsworth wasn't interested in Lynch directing him until he realized, no, I won't do that in this movie. Lynch is great at that, sure, but he should be extremely proud to have a nice movie like this in his resume. It's just nice. It's very sweet. Makes me feel good. I'm a cynic so much of the time. We said it on, I think, Inside Out. My default, what is it, the emotion, the joy that's in Riley, but in the father it's the anger. I would probably have that as my driving force too, but...
The anger comes from your disappointment. I think deep down you are an idealist and you get disappointed all the time.
George Carlin said it. He's a disappointed idealist.
Yeah.
I really relate to that. I want to be the optimist, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't want to think about that anymore, but this movie helps me feel better about humanity. So that was how we saw The Straight Story. We won't be back in 7 days. I will. I'll have a solo show on the 11th. The Remembrance Day / Veterans Day episode will be about a war movie of the sci-fi type, Jim Cameron's The Terminator. But the next show Bev and I post together will be in 2 weeks. And that will be simply one of the greatest comedies ever made. And she's not aware I'm going to talk about this right now because I moved it up. It's probably the best Star Trek movie of all time. And one of the greatest comedies. And it is Galaxy Quest.
What? Oh, no. It's going to be our first 3-hour episode.
Might be some member berries going on there. Member. There will be, not just might. The coming attractions trivia question for Galaxy Quest. There's irony in how Sam Rockwell is always whining that he's going to die when they're doing dangerous missions, including going to that planet. What is the irony of his character when Saris attacks them all in the climax?
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out our next podcast about Galaxy Quest.
The joy over there.
You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. While you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. That is the best way to support the podcast. You can find us both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. You can also reach us by email, haveyouverirseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And don't forget that to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES, and that'll get you a 20% discount.
Before we go, I see in the IMDb credit list, Kevin P. Farley and John Farley play Harold and Thorvald, the bickering twins. I saw Farley. I clicked on John. I mentioned Chris.
Oh, are they his brothers?
They are his brothers.
Okay, I take it back. Now I like that scene.
He would have been one of the brothers, and I guess the other one wouldn't have been in the movie with him. Oh, man. That'll make me cry at the end. I wasn't the biggest Chris Farley fan, but I do appreciate how much people like Sandler and these others still miss him after all these years.
And it was a tragedy. He died so young.
Way too young and so sad. He was so sad, apparently, despite being a funny guy. Okay, to wrap this up, time to fire up the mower and mow the lawn, I guess. I'm too much of a weenie to make a trip like this.
And cut.